Shen Qingqiu was overjoyed. Luo Binghe was probably at his limit too, but he never expected that Zhu Zilang would add, "Just now, my lord said that he wanted to visit you tonight." Before he finished the first syllable of that last word, Luo Binghe at last couldn't take it anymore and exploded into action. Shen Qingqiu hadn't even seen how Luo Binghe moved before Zhu Zilang was down on one knee, coughing up a mouthful of blood. When he looked up again, another person was on the bed. Luo Binghe had one arm around Shen Qingqiu, glaring at Zhu Zilang with fury in his eyes. After his initial shock, Zhu Zilang's expression quickly evolved into one of realization. "You, immortal Master Shen, you too?" Shen Qingqiu buried his forehead in his hands. He didn't want to say a word. Luo Binghe lifted his other hand and made a clenching motion. A black handprint appeared on Zhu Zilang's throat, and his body jerked upward to float in midair. "Don't kill him. There'll be consequences," Shen Qingqiu cut in. "And the situation isn't what you think it is." Luo Binghe's lips were taut, and veins popped on the back of his hand as his fingers tightened. Zhu Zilang's face slowly turned green, but he showed not a single sign of pain. Right then, another voice spoke from outside the tent. "Peak Lord Shen, may I come in?" "Why was it so lively tonight? Speak of the devil, Shen Qingqiu's doorway was practically a marketplace." In a second, the faces of all three people inside the tent, the strangler, the strangled, and the witness, went dark. In a chaotic flurry of motion, Shen Qingqiu pointed at Zhu Zilang, dangling by the throat, then pointed at Luo Binghe and made a motion to represent slitting someone's throat, followed by crossing his arms into an X. Who knew if Luo Binghe understood, since he just shook his head again and again? Under these circumstances, it was obvious that no one was going to answer the person outside. After a moment of silence, Tian Langjun said, "I'm coming in." He was just like his nephew. Both of them only asked for show before walking right in. So, when Tian Langjun walked in, he saw precisely the scene. Zhu Zilang and Shen Qingqiu were pulling and tugging at each other as they tumbled upon the bed, a towering mess of blankets piled behind them. When Tian Langjun entered, both of them whipped their heads around, and in those 4 eyes, on those 2 faces, were identical expressions. Complexions spotted white and red. Shen Qingqiu's robe still hung off his elbow, halfway removed. Even with how much of a weirdo Tian Langjun was, his smiley expression still froze on his face at the scene. Only after a while did he say in a light voice, "How unexpected." Zhu Zilang blushed. My lord, the situation is a bit complicated. Either way, it's not what you think." His body blocked the blanket covering Luo Binghe, and Shen Qingqiu was half sprawled on top of him, hiding the hand Luo Binghe had clenched on the small of Zhu Zilang's back, a vital acupoint. With their sprawled positions combined with the fluttering curtains, it would definitely be difficult to discover there was an extra person for some time yet. Tian Langjun nodded. He actually seemed a bit happy as he said, "There's no need to explain. I now understand. I understand everything." Given his tastes and assumptions as a lover of regret of Chunshan, if he said he, quote, understood, then there was most definitely a need to explain. "Is there any reason for your distinguished self to visit at such late hours?" Shen Qingqiu asked. "If there is, please explain. If not, let's all rest. Thank you, I won't be seeing you out." "Actually, it wasn't anything major," said Tian Langjun. "There was just a minor abnormality, and I didn't know where Zhu Zilang had run off to, so I checked here first. But it seemed that it was not the time. No matter, please continue. I don't mind." My lord, said Zhu Zilang. Whenever he spoke another word, Luo Binghe exerted more force. Whenever he shifted his leg slightly, Luo Binghe exerted more force. Whenever he tried to change positions, Luo Binghe also exerted more force. He exerted more and more force, and a torrent of demonic qi poured in through the small of Zhu Zilang's back until a bitter taste rose in his mouth. Zhu Zilang didn't know what it meant to, quote, feel bummed out, unquote, but he was certainly experiencing what it was like to be bummed out right now. All right, said Shen Qingqiu. Many thanks for your consideration. Then we'll continue. Please see yourself out. But Tianlangjun did not seem about to leave. Instead, he found a stool and sat down. Why does Peak Lord Shen not ask me exactly what I meant by, quote, a minor abnormality? He asked leisurely. This is most unlike your previous curiosity and enthusiasm. Oh my God, it looked like this guy wasn't going to be so easy to chase off. Realizing that he couldn't escape this problem, Shen Qingqiu instead calmed down and smiled. If Tianlangjun really likes to watch, it is no matter if he wishes to converse and liven things up. Please go ahead. And so Tianlangjun began, quote, livening things up. Well, not long ago, the Xingmo sword I kept by my side suddenly began to levitate and hum persistently. Clearly no one was summoning it, yet this phenomenon occurred. It truly demands one pay a bit of attention. Shen Qingqiu immediately understood that the, quote, one thing Luo Binghe, quote, needed to worry about, which he hadn't had a chance to explain, was in short, Xingmo sword. After all, a sword that had followed Luo Binghe for so many years would inevitably have some sort of reaction when its master appeared nearby. Verily, that is a curious event, Shen Qingqiu said. But I'm afraid there isn't much meaning in Tianlangjun discussing this with me. Tianlangjun slowly stood. It is most definitely meaningless to discuss it with Peak Lord Shen. But if a certain naughty child comes looking for him, that would make it very meaningful. Though it was only a few short words, with every word he spoke, he would pause, taking a step closer to the bed each time. Shen Qingqiu was visibly holding onto Zhu Zilang with both arms, and Luo Binghe was secretly pinching Zhu Zilang's acupoint. As Tianlangjun took step after step, getting closer and closer, the force behind this master-disciple pair's actions grew and grew. Zhu Zilang was truly very much without fault and much unfortunate. Just as Tianlangjun made to lift the bed curtains, the shrill and sonorous cry of a wild beast sounded from outside the tent. He whipped around to look. Outside the white tent, firelight surged into the skies, while soaring black shadows were cast from all directions. The roars of beasts mixed with hysterical screams. Invaders! Surround him! All of you, surround him! Don't let him escape! He's gotten out! Blade met blade, while swords and arrows tore through the air, uniting in a raucous chorus, with the sound of fangs and claws tearing into flesh. Tianlangjun didn't have time to say a single word and darted out of the tent. Shen Qingqiu's heart dropped back down from where it had been suspended. This invader's timing was just perfect! Luo Binghe flipped off the bed and helped Shen Qingqiu down. Zhu Zilang had been tossed to the floor and was unable to move for the time being. Shen Qingqiu looked down and said, Many thanks for just now. With Zhu Zilang's degree of loyalty, not disregarding his personal safety, to yell, My lord, it's them. It was these two. Counted as intentional help. Upon hearing this, Zhu Zilang sighed. This humble one understands. Understand what? Shen Qingqiu asked. Luo Binghe was impatient. Why waste time talking to him? Zhu Zilang looked up and said in full sincerity, To alleviate the pain of longing, immortal Master Shen had an unfortunate encounter in the depths of night. Though this would inevitably be a blight upon his honor, the circumstances are understandable. Shen Qingqiu had no words. This child had probably spent so long by Tianlang Jung's side that he's assimilated the latter's thought patterns. Indeed, Shen Qingqiu really shouldn't have wasted his time talking to him. The master-disciple pair slunk out of the tent, only to see that, not too far away on the overgrown plains, the dark masses of the southern border demon army had surrounded someone or something. The two dazzling pure white silhouettes in the center were especially eye-catching. One was a sword, swooping with unstoppable momentum, while the other was a person who left not a blade of grass or a shard of armor in his wake. The circle surrounding him was broken again and again, and new demons filled in the gaps one after another. Tianlang Jung's honest words of admiration drifted over the night wind. Excellent blade work. Excellent spiritual power. The newcomer stood atop the head of a giant armor-wearing wolf that he had slain with his bare hands. His white clothes were spotless, and he was marred only by a small splatter of blood across his cheek. This fighting style, that went for max fanfare, that was simple and brutal, and where the attacker loathed to leave a single member of the enemy camp unaware of his grand arrival, certainly didn't let down Bai Zhan Peak's reputation for arrogance and love of battle. It was Liu Qingge. Two pure white wargs leapt through the crowd of beasts to prostrate themselves at Tianlang Jung's feet. One raised its head, and a human voice came from its mouth. My lord, it's Changqiu Mountain's Bai Zhan Peak Lord, Liu Qingge. Tianlang Jung nodded. So that's how it is. No wonder his blade work and spiritual power are so superb. But why would the Bai Zhan Peak Lord suddenly grace the southern border with his presence? Liu Qingge leaned to the side slightly, and Chen Luàn flew back into his hand. He flicked away the beads of blood gathered upon the blade tip and said coldly, Is Shen Qingqiu here? Shen Qingqiu was overwhelmed by this show of favor. What? Was Great Master Liu here to rescue him? Luo Binghe took a glance at the expression on his face and pursed his lips. Tianlang Jung finally understood. Ah, so you're here to look for Peak Lord Shen. He is indeed here with me. Bring him out, said Liu Qingge. It may be a bad time for him to see you, Tianlang Jung said suggestively. And even if he did, he likely wouldn't want to return to Changqiu Mountain with you. Shen Qingqiu didn't even know what complaints to spatter about this. Liu Qingge squinted. One of the wargs at Tianlang Jung's feet said, 100 battles by Zhan Peak, they say. In my opinion, they don't truly deserve the name. I heard that when this Liu Qingge fought that Luo Binghe kid, he lost horribly countless times. He hasn't lived up to the Peak name for a long while. It should be called 99 Battles Peak by now. No, it should be called the 98 Battles Peak Lord, the other continued. If he fought our lord, he'd lose without a doubt. These two beasts were so mouthy, sycophantic and mouthy. With this disagreeable remark, the brawl broke out anew. Liu Qingge tapped his foot and flew forward like an arc of white lightning. Tianlang Jung was in no hurry to enter the fray. With a casual flick of his arm, blood flew from his fingertips. When the droplets hit the ground, they didn't soak into the dirt, but instead solidified, quickly forming into 6 blood wolves with crimson fur. They surrounded Liu Qingge, biting and tearing at him as they circled him like wheels of wind and fire. With incredible ease, Liu Qingge unleashed Chen Luan's sword, and the heads of all 6 beasts separated from their bodies, melting them back into liquid form. But when the sword flew back to him, the blood wolves rapidly coalesced again and continued their dance of bared fangs and waving claws. Though Liu Qingge's attack was powerful and precise, without a flaw to be named, neither did it have any actual effect. Nor did Tianlangjun lower his bleeding hand. He kept it lazily extended, and as the blood dripped down, new beasts sprung up one after another. He's bleeding that much, and his face doesn't even pale for a single second? Is he a mobile blood bank? Liu Qingge was here to save him. Shen Qingqiu couldn't just remain an onlooker, watching this fire from the opposite shore, remaining aloof to the conflict. He was about to move when Luo Binghe stole ahead of him and dashed outside. Tianlangjun looked intently at Luo Binghe. So, you came after all? Shi Zun is here. How could I not come? Luo Binghe said coldly. Zhu Zilang. Look at this face of his, Tianlangjun said with a smile. The sight of this look of cold fury truly makes me happy, Zhu Zilang? Only now did he realize that Zhu Zilang still hadn't arrived, and no one was there to chime in. A disappointed expression crossed Tianlangjun's face. Off to the side, Liu Qingge was about to speak when he suddenly saw Shen Qingqiu and forgot the insults he was about to spit. He froze for a second, then shouted, Hey! Shen Qingqiu waved back in greeting. The shock on Tianlangjun's face grew rather than waned. He turned toward Luo Binghe. So, just now, in there, all 3 of you? He took 3 pauses for the entire sentence, but Shen Qingqiu still understood what he meant to express.